Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelly Emily, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. And this month, the more than 100,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose How to Age Disgracefully as their pick for March. And I'm so glad they did, because this book is so fun, and it's filled with characters of all ages doing all sorts of things, and it's just an adventure, and I couldn't really put it down. I think I read it in 2 days. It's just fabulous. And we're so lucky to have Claire Pooley with us. She's the author of a memoir about her life called The Sober Diaries, and she's written 3 novels, including The Authenticity Project. All are big hits. And so we're so glad to have her here with us. Welcome, Claire.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who voted for my book. I can't tell you how thrilled I am. And I joined the Girlfriend Facebook page, and I love it, because I think often social media can be sort of, quite a divisive and
Yes.
difficult place, but there is something so lovely about groups of people talking about books. It's
Yes.
just a wonderful place to hang out. So
They are united by their love of reading, and it's a very safe space. It's really fun and very supportive. So I love it. So first of all, I just have to ask where you got the idea to do this book.
Oh, you know what? It was a combination of things. I guess the first thing is that I'm now 55, and I don't feel any different from the way I did when I was 25. And I don't imagine that when I'm 75, I'll feel any different either. And
Right.
I was just getting fed up with reading books and seeing films where the only older characters were sort of side characters, and they were usually sad side characters, and they were generally sort of in a bit of a bad place, and they would be rescued by a younger person. And I thought, well, sod that, I actually want to see older people in books who are this kind of person that I want to be, and are kicking ass and showing younger people how to do things properly. So I guess that was the first thing. And then a couple of other things coincided. One was the fact that I kept reading about these centres, and they have a lot in the Netherlands where they combine senior care with nursery care.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would be a really interesting space to to put a novel in, where you've got these sort of older people and toddlers sort of forced to share the same space. And it would be interesting to see what sort of magic that, might happen in that instance. And then the final thing was, I was listening to the radio, and there was a story about the Hatton Garden a jewelry heist, which is this big jewelry robbery, a couple of decades ago, where and it took them a long time to find the people who had committed this massive jewelry heist. And the reason it'd taken so long for them to find them was that they were all in their 70s. And I thought, yay, how interesting that sort of, these ace thieves were sort of, that much older. And that got me thinking about what might happen if you put a group of badly behaved older people in this situation. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you come up with the idea for the very first scene with the bus and the policeman stopping the bus full of all these characters?
Oh, yeah. The way I write, I don't have the whole plot in my head when I start. I have the beginning, and I have the end, and I have a few key scenes. And that scene was, I think, the first one I imagined. And it came from reading about and listening to this story about the Hatton jewelry heist. Because, I thought, wouldn't it be funny if you got this group of people, sort of seniors and toddlers, young kids, in a minibus, one of those minibuses you see driving through London the whole time with people on a sort of day trip. And they were stopped by the police, and everybody thought that they were the one the police were looking for, because they all have something in their past. And, don't we all have secrets in our past? I mean, I'm not sure I have any secrets that would involve the police, but, I certainly have stuff I wouldn't want everyone to know, So I thought that would be a great place to start. And, when I started writing the book, I didn't know what they'd all done. And I sort of, as I carried on writing, it became clear to me what their felonies were. But at the beginning, I just knew they'd be confessing to something.
It definitely drew everybody into the book quickly. So did you really? I always ask this question. I mean, was there a character or a scene or a section that was particularly challenging to write whether, was Daphne more challenging than Arch? I mean, was there a part of it that was challenging to write?
I think Ziggy was the most challenging for me because his upbringing is so different from mine. I had a very easy middle class, sort of childhood, and Ziggy is being brought up by a single mum who is absolutely doing her best, but has to struggle juggling 3 different jobs to keep things together. And he lives on a really rough council estate, which is ruled by competing gangs, and he gets sort of drawn into that. And I've read about gang culture. I've watched lots of programs about it, but it's not my world. So, and I was really keen to make sure I got it right. So, I did a whole load of research into sort of how that world worked, and then I found a sensitivity reader who knew a lot about gang culture to check through everything and make sure that I hadn't sort of said anything that was was incorrect or didn't feel authentic. So he was my hardest character, but I really enjoyed writing him because I think it's so easy to look at people like that and to think that they are bad people. And Ziggy isn't a bad person in any way, shape, or form. He's a really great guy. Yeah. He's just stuck in a situation that not of his own making, that he's struggling to find his way out of. And I thought it was important to see the humanity in characters like that.
Well, I love the way you had older people helping and supporting younger people and vice versa. So Ziggy was helping Daphne with the internet and online dating, and she was helping him by babysitting. So I really like that part of the novel. Sorry. And you said you were in your 50s.
I enjoyed that too.
Yeah, it's very well written. You said you were in your 50s. So I wonder, did you connect with Lydia, the character? Did that draw from your own life at all?
Yeah, I mean, she's absolutely the same life stage as me. So, her daughters have both left home and gone to university, which is what I'm facing, the empty nest. Yeah. And, I'm menopausal like Lydia, and sort of dealing with that too. And I think it's really easy at that age to feel a bit lost, and to feel like, you don't know quite, you don't feel as needed anymore, I guess. And so I really wanted to explore that. I mean, but in some ways, Lydia is absolutely not like me. So I'm lucky in that I have a really lovely husband. So unlike hers, poor Lydia. And I'm a bit feistier than Lydia. I mean, at the beginning of the book, she's a bit of a imp, really, and she absolutely grows into herself. But many thanks to Daphne.
Daphne was great. I think Daphne was my favorite character, actually.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Can you cite any other books or TV series or films that have showcased older adults in this way that you drew inspiration from at all? Not a lot, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the Marigold Hotel, in which the book and film set in India, which I thought was absolutely fabulous. I mean, I can't think of any others offhand, but there are many, but not as many as there should be.
There should be, exactly. No, I agree. I asked the book club members what they wanted me to ask you, and one of them said they love the dog, Maggie Thatcher, being in this book. And I think that there was a dog in your other book, Iona. What was it? Iverson's Rules for Commuting, and the dog was named Lulu, I think. So, do you like to bring a dog character in these books?
I always have a dog in my books, and actually my American editor as well, Pam Dorman, is a huge dog fan. So, I remember when she was giving me feedback on my very first novel, which was The Authenticity Project. I remember her saying, "This book needs more dog." And I completely agree. I think you can't have too much dog. But I think there's something really interesting about dogs in literature, I think, because I think you can tell a lot about people by the way they treat a dog.
Yes.
And what I loved playing with in How to Age Disgracefully is the way each of the different characters had a different name for the dog. They had different rules for the dog. So, Daphne was constantly giving her steak, and
Yes.
Lizzie was being very strict about her having dry kibble. And, it's and I thought it was a way of showing readers more about my characters, but in a slightly different way. So I have to tell you a quick story though about my dog in the Authenticity Project, because in the Authenticity Project, the dog was called Keith.
Okay.
Keith was an old dog and rescued by Julian, one of the main characters. And right at the end of the book, Keith has left for reasons I won't go into, so I don't give you any spoilers. But Keith has left by himself, and I can't tell you how many emails and messages I had from people saying that they'd had sleepless nights and were terribly worried about Keith and was he okay and what happened to him. And it made me realize how much people care about fictional dogs, And I wrote back to everyone saying, "Don't worry, Keith is okay." And I told them what happened to Keith in the end. And I had to, when we did a reprint of the book, I had to put a PS in the author's note to explain what happened to Keith so that people didn't get worried, because I didn't want to keep getting emails from distraught readers.
So how long did it take you to write The Art of Aging Disgracefully, and what's your writing process like?
Oh, well, I write the first draft generally very quickly, because for me, writing a first draft is almost like, imagine if you're doing a landscape painting, you would do a rough sketch first before you do anything else, to sort of give you an idea of scale and perspective and all of that sort of stuff, composition. And that's how I approach my first draft. So my first draft is really just me trying to work out what this book is about. So I write the first draft in about 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And then I spend about another 4 months editing it by myself, and then about another 4 months editing it with my editors. So the whole process from beginning to end takes about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you always set aside a certain number of hours each day that you feel like you need to write, or?
Yeah, I write really early. I think authors tend to write either really early or really late, and I write really early. So I wake up super early, like 5:30 in the morning, and I start working out the next chapter that I'm writing in my head while I'm still half asleep. So it feels like it's almost a dream, and I find that liminal state really creative. And I think it helps you to think laterally. I think if you're wrestling with any problem or anything, thinking about it at that time of day gives you really interesting solutions. So I work it all out in my head, and then I write for about 3 hours.
Oh, okay.
And then in the afternoon I edit, but I don't write anything new in the afternoon, because my brain is by that stage isn't working in the way I need it to.
Your brain is like my brain.
Well, by the afternoon it's filled with to-do lists and chores and problems and all that. First thing in the morning it's like a blank sheet of paper.
So I think everybody that read this new book of yours is now going to go back and read all of your other books.
Oh,
and I know that your memoir, The Sober Diaries, that's quite personal, as is the Authenticity Project. I mean, do you run these books or drafts by family members or anything before you take them to the editor, or no?
The Sober Diaries, I made sure that everyone was happy with it before I published it, because that's nonfiction, and my family are in it, my husband's in it, my kids are in it, my parents are in it, my friends are in it, and I didn't want to upset anyone, so I asked everyone whether they were happy with what I was saying and whether they wanted me to change their names, and actually amazingly, I think only one person asked me to change their name.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I did. And with fiction, I get my eldest. I have 3 kids, and my eldest is now 21, and I always get her to read everything first,
That's nice.
because she is blunt enough to tell me the truth, and I'm not going to get sort of, angry with her.
Right.
And unlike my husband, who ended up sleeping on the sofa for 2 nights after I showed him a draft of a book once.
Oh, no.
And she's also, she's a good, she has a good sense of story and where things are working and where they're not. So she always reads things first.
So the characters of Daphne, like I said, that was my favorite character, and Art. Were they based on anybody you know, or are they a composite of a bunch of different characters that maybe are in your life, or?
I don't think any of my characters are based on one single person, because apart from anything else, I think it would be sort of kind of cheating, But they are based on composites. So actually, funny enough, my kids bought me a mug which has written on it, "Be careful, or you'll end up in my next novel."
That's great.
And it's really true, because, I'll meet people, and there'll be something they say or something they do, and I'll think, "Oh, I must remember that, because
Right.
that would be really good somewhere." And all of this stuff goes into a sort of melting pot, and then, it just sort of, things just pop out randomly, and you think, "Oh, yeah, that would be good for this character." And, when I'm writing a character, I generally start by asking not what they're good at and what their great strengths are. I start by asking what their fatal flaw is. What
Yeah.
does this person struggle with? What are they finding difficult? What do they most want to change about themselves? And then I layer all their other characteristics around that. So I sort of think, okay, so Art, he was struggling with the fact that his career had never taken off. And because of stuff that had happened in his background, he was he'd picked up this terrible shoplifting habit. And then from there, I think, okay, well, how would somebody like that, what sort of friends might they have? Might they look like? And everything sort of comes from
That,
that
yeah.
starting point.
So what authors or books have inspired you throughout your life? Are you reading anything great right now?
I tell you, the 2 best books I've read recently, you've probably read them already. The first is Wedding People. The Wedding People.
I
Alice.
haven't, but a lot of women have talked about that, how much they love that book. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's exactly my kind of book. I love it. I really enjoyed that. And then a book that actually is quite different from anything else that I've read recently is Margot's Got Money Troubles. Have you read that
Oh, I
one?
haven't read that one either. Wow, I
So
must. Oh, good.
that's really interesting, because it's a single mum who, again, this happens right at the beginning, so it's not a spoiler, but she's a single mum who is trying to make ends meet by running a business on OnlyFans. And I'd heard of OnlyFans, but I hadn't really thought about what it would be like to be one of the women who make a living that way.
Yeah.
And it's hilariously funny and very eye-opening. So I really enjoyed that too. But in terms of authors that I guess have had an impact in the past, and one, have you read the Tales of the City series by Armistead Maupin?
I have not.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Good.
They're set in San Francisco in the 1970s, and it's what I loved about those books, and what really inspired my first novel, and therefore I guess my subsequent novels, is it's about a group of people who all end up living in the same apartment building in San Francisco, but they're very different, and they have different stories which all come together because they're all in this city at this particular point in time. And I remember thinking that was just such a great structure for a novel, the idea of strangers coming together and how they might form a community, an unlikely community, and change each other's lives. And I guess that has inspired all of my writing.
Great. My favorite, we had the Girlfriend Book Club picked The Lion Women of Tehran. Have you read
Oh,
that
no,
one?
I've heard of that, but I haven't read it yet. Is
It's
that good?
excellent, and the author came on with me. She was amazing. It was a really great read. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Okay, well, I'm definitely putting that on my list. Thank you.
So did I hear that they're making How to Age Disgracefully into a film? Is that right, or no?
Oh, I wish they were.
I can see it as a film. I mean, I really can.
I see it as a film. I see all my books as films because, when I talked about how I sort of imagine the next chapter that I'm writing, when I'm half asleep, I run it forward in my head like a movie. So I see it very visually, and I would is my big, I guess my big dream when I was younger was to write a novel, and then you do that and you think, okay, now what? Now what's my big dream? And my big dream now is for one of my novels to be on the screen. I would so love to see that. So I'm keeping everything crossed.
Okay. I
But
hope
I would love for Helen Mirren to play Daphne. That would be
she would
my
be perfect in that role.
movie, wouldn't she? She's exactly the right age too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what are you working on now, book-wise?
Oh, I've been struggling with the next one. I find the beginning of novels really hard because once I've got the right idea and I'm sort of, I've written a few chapters, then I'm off and
Yeah.
it's great. And all my characters start improvising and it all comes, but right at the beginning when you're still struggling with finding what that idea is, I find it really hard. So I started writing 2 books, which I then decided weren't right, and I'm now on my third attempt at my 4th novel,
Oh,
which I think might be the one actually.
good.
But it's at very, very early stages at the moment. But what I can tell you is it's set in a bookshop, which
Oh,
yeah, which
that'd be
I've
fun.
never done before, and I think I'm having fun with it so far. So hopefully this will be the one. Fingers crossed.
So you said when you were young, you always wanted to write a novel.
Mhm.
If you weren't writing books, is there another career path you might have taken, or is this you just knew you were gonna be a writer ever since you were little?
Oh, I didn't know I was going to be a writer because I didn't think that I would be good enough necessarily, but it was always a dream, and um, I guess in terms of what I would have done otherwise, uh, I've spent 20 years in advertising, which was great
Oh, I
fun.
did read that about you, yes.
Yeah, it
Uh-huh.
was great fun, at least at the beginning. I'm not sure it was so much fun by the end. And I think my other fantasy career was I always rather liked the idea of being a barrister, so I like the idea of standing up in court in a wig and gown and pontificating, but I'm not sure I would have been any good at it.
I also read that you, often write your books outside of London in the countryside, is that correct?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in Cornwall, down by the sea, and I love writing there. Or I go up to Scotland. I find that if it really helps to get away from your normal environment
Right.
because to start with, you don't have as many distractions. You don't end up sitting there thinking, "Oh, I really should empty the dishwasher," or I should do some DIY or household
Yeah.
chores or whatever. And I think it just again it helps you to think about things in a slightly different way. So I think London is amazing for providing inspiration, and I love the theatre, I love the movies, I love the restaurants, I love watching all the people, but when it comes to actually writing, I quite like to get away into sort of, where there's nobody and just, so I have no excuse but to sit there with my laptop.
So I just have 2 more questions. One
Mm.
is were you surprised at the reaction to How to Age Disgracefully? Was it more I mean, people seem to just absolutely, love it and rave about it. Or did you find that you had more of a reaction like maybe your memoir, The Sober Diaries? Um, just
Um,
curious.
oh, I mean, I love the fact that, pretty much every day I get an email from somebody saying how much they enjoyed How to Age Disgracefully and how much it made them laugh. And I've had some of the funniest emails from people in their sort of 70s, 80s, even 90s, saying how much they enjoyed it and telling me a bit about how they're aging disgracefully, which is great fun. And in fact, I had
fodder for a new book.
Yeah, I had this letter, and I've never received an actual letter that was sent via my publishers. Normally, I get messages via social media or email. Yeah. And this lovely lady wrote a letter, handwritten letter, to my publishers, who then sent it on to me. And she said that she was in her 80s, and she told me how much she loved the book, which was really lovely. And she ended by saying, you know, how in the book, Art and William constantly play this game, Best Way to Die. So they it's just their sort of black humor, and they'll say, best way to die, run over by a car or in a plane crash, you know.
I love that.
or whatever. And anyway, this lady ended by saying, P.S. best way to die, under a toy boy. P.P.S. other best way to die, laughing while under a toy boy.
That's so cute. That's so sweet. I love it.
So I think it hasn't necessarily had more of a reaction than my other books, because but it's had a reaction from a different type of person, actually, and I love that. I think people relate to it in a. I think it's probably had more people saying how much it's made them laugh than anything else I've written. I think that's
great. So finally, I always ask, The Girlfriend is all about female friendship, and especially the importance of female friendship as you grow older. So I always have to ask, what do you do for fun? What do you like to do for fun with your girlfriends when you're not reading or writing? And
oh gosh, you know, my girlfriends are so important to me. I mean, I have I still see my old school friends, you know, at least once every 5 or 6 months. And you know, I was at school a long time ago, but you know, we still meet up, and we still go on holiday together from time to time.
Oh,
and,
nice.
you know, that sort of thing. And likewise, my university friends. You know, I have girlfriends that go back a really long way, and there's something really special about that. Right. You know, there are shortcuts that you can use, and you find that even when you haven't seen one of them for a really long time, you can just pick up where you left off, and that's amazing. And in terms of what I do a lot of walking with dogs often. So, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, I'll meet a girlfriend with a dog and a coffee, and we'll go for a long walk for an hour, 2 hours, and we'll just chat. And I find that there's something about walking that enables you to open up in a way that you don't sometimes when you're sitting right opposite somebody. So yeah, that's my favorite things: walks with women and a dog, ideally. Although some of my friends come from my dog walks without a dog, just for fun. So
I have 2 dogs as well, and I love walking them.
So. Which dogs do you have?
Oh, they're just mutts from the rescue center. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, the book I'm writing at the moment, the dog is a rescue dog, but a big one, like part Irish wolfhound.
Oh, wow. Well, we can't wait for your next book. Again, her new novel is How to Age Disgracefully. If you haven't read it, and I think probably everybody watching this has, but please do read it if you haven't already. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining us. I just want to remind everybody in the book club to please stay on the page, because I'll be posting some conversation starters about the book so you can share your ideas and opinions. And also just a reminder that our book in April is The God of the Woods. And Liz Moore, the author, will be joining us April 15th at 7:30 p.m. So thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Claire, for joining us. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate it too.
Thank you.